dances, right, Jeannie? If you're up to it. Okay. For those of you that are new to B'kai HaKodesh, this is our version of a Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh technically is tomorrow night. That means the new month, or the head of the month. And we begin the new month. What month have we been in? We've been in Adar, right? Guess what? We get to begin the new month of Adar. I'll explain that in a little bit. But we do begin the month of Adar again. It's Adar 2. Because every once in a while they add an extra month to make sure the cycle stays where it belongs. And I'll even talk about, And so for this particular month, I've got some things we're going to be learning. But before we do that, I have this really strong passion in me that says no matter what we do, we bless the Lord. No matter what we do, we worship. We spend a little time in worship. Yeah, we'll be doing that one towards the end. And she taught us that one of our first B'kai HaKodeshes. Yeah. The celebration of the new moon goes back to biblical times, goes back, it's Numbers 10:10. There are several places where it talks about the new moon, where it says that you are supposed to celebrate, you are to mark the time. And it's not a matter of honoring the moon, it's a matter of marking the time. And we mark time because God works in time. And He works in our time. So that's what we're doing, is we're marking the time. During the biblical times, this period was used as a day for blowing the shofar. We'll blow the shofars before we leave. A festive meal, that's why we eat. Visiting with prophets, if there are prophets to go to, or teachers to go to. And not doing any work. It is considered a Sabbath to the Lord. Whatever day it's on. Now, guess what? Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. So we get 2 Sabbaths in a row this week. Today and tomorrow, if you should so choose. But what happens is people would watch for the moon. They would watch to see the new moon. And when 2 were able to report that they had seen the new moon, torches would be lit. The Sanhedrin would declare it. Torches would be lit. And it would go all over the world. And celebration of the new month would come. We understand from the Talmud, it says, whoever pronounces a benediction over the new moon welcomes, as it were, the presence of the Shekinah. The presence of Shekinah is linked to welcoming the new moon, because we are welcoming the calendar God has put in place for us. And we're welcoming Him into it. And that's what it's about. It's a reminder of God, a reminder that God is the creator of the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything. He is king over all our lives, days, weeks, months, and years. We come to Him as our Father, and we come to Him regularly. And I keep coming back to these 2 songs, The Great I Am and Our God, and we did them this morning. I hope you guys don't mind doing them again. Those of you who don't want to dance, or if I don't think there is a dance to these 2 yet, because I've just started doing these here. But there are flags, there are tambourines, there are maracas, there are instruments of worship. Worship is a participation. If I'm the only one doing something, I'll quit. So let's do something. Let's start with Our God. Water you turn into wine. Water you turn to do tonight, and in terms of the Rosh Chodesh, the B'chai HaKodesh, and blessing of the month. And I want to teach a little bit about the tribe of Levi and about why we're honoring the tribe of Levi in this, the second Adar. The tribe of Levi is not one of the 12 tribes that camped around the periphery of the camp of Israel. Remember that the tribe of Joseph was divided and became Ephraim and Manasseh. And so in the encampment around the encampment of Israel and the marching orders were all using those two as 12 tribes, making it the 12 tribes. Levi was not counted as a tribe. So in a normal calendar, when there's a normal 12 months, Levi is not counted in the months. But when there is an additional month, that month is assigned to Levi as a unique month, as a unique tribe, as one who was unique before God. There's all kinds of things that I've looked at and prayed about and that I could go into that it's like, the Lord just kept bringing me back to some pretty basic about Levi. And Levi is the third son of Leah. Remember, God opened Leah's womb because he saw that she was not loved. And in Genesis 29:34, and I didn't mark them all, so I'm going to... Genesis 29:34, we find out the meaning of the name, but I have to get to Genesis 29. And we find out something about him. Every name has a meaning, and God gives us our names for a reason. Even if our parents didn't know the reason, God still gives us our names for a reason. I think he doesn't control all of that. I know he does. Genesis 29:34, it says this. Again she conceived. This is her third time. And when she gave birth to a son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. And so she named him Levi. A more direct translation of that is, now at last my husband will accompany me. Accompany me. Because she knew he loved Rachel more than her. Now at last, I've given him 3 sons, now he's going to have to come sit next to me. He's going to have to love me. He's going to have to accompany me. And so the name Levi means he shall accompany, or he will be attached. Levi is an interesting character as he grows. And what we find is that he is a man who functioned out of anger and deceit. In Genesis 34:13, in Genesis 34 we have the story of Dinah and the Shechemites. Do you remember that story where he goes back into the land? Jacob goes back to Israel, goes back to his land, he goes back to where he's supposed to be, and he stops before he gets to Bethel. When he returned, he was supposed to go to Bethel. He had promised God would keep him safe while he sojourned. When he came back, he would build a house for God in Bethel. He had told him that. But he stopped short. He stopped in Shechem. And his daughter Dinah, who was also born to Leah, so this is Levi's little sister. Okay? Remember that. It's Levi's little sister. Goes out to visit with the women of the town of Shechem. And the son of the ruler of Shechem likes her and takes her for himself. And he violates her. And afterwards he decides he really does like her and he wants to marry her. He wants her to be one of his wives. And so he goes to Jacob and he asks for her hand in marriage. It says in verse 13 of Genesis 34, because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, we can't do such a thing. We cannot give our sister to a man who's not circumcised. That would be a disgrace. And so what they do is they talk this man into getting his whole community circumcised. Every male in the town. Now I got to tell you, this Shechem and Hamor must have been pretty powerful men in that community. to get adult men to agree to be circumcised so that Shechem can have this girl as wife. He held something over everybody there, I'll bet. I don't know what it was, but I don't see someone come saying, I want to marry that girl, and they say we have to be circumcised. So come on, let's get circumcised. And everyone, okay, sure, fine, whatever. I just don't see it being that simple, but whatever it was, they did comply. They did it. And in verse 25, 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They took vengeance. They took their own vengeance. And I think that's what we need to remember, is they took their own vengeance on the people of Shechem. They ended up, Jacob became very afraid, and they ended up going on to Bethel, which is where they should have gone to begin with. But what happens is that because of this, because of their rage, because they dealt deceitfully, and it wasn't in a moments of rage. This was plotted and planned. It was 3 days later. They thought on this for a few days. They took vengeance. In Genesis 49, where we have the blessings that Jacob gives to his sons, we're going to find out he does not speak very highly of Levi and Simeon. Genesis 49, beginning in verse 5. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. That's not exactly a blessing, is it? Doesn't sound like a blessing to me. And it's for both Simeon and Levi. Now, we dealt with Simeon we'll deal with Simeon at that time in the calendar year, but we're going to deal with Levi here. Because he's given a curse. He's given a curse. And yet, notice where the tribe of Levi stands in our banners. Out of a curse? Let me tell you something. He was cursed to be scattered and dispersed. And it became a reality. When they went into the land, they were not given a solid piece of land, were they? They were scattered into cities among all of the tribes. They were dispersed throughout. But what happens is that Levi's scattering and dispersing, which was meant as a curse by Jacob, becomes a source of blessing for all of Israel. How do you turn a curse into a blessing? See, that's what I saw for this month. Turning the curse into a blessing. And here's how they did it. Because we're told how they did it. They took their zeal and turned it towards God. According to rabbinic understanding, when the sons of Israel went down into Egypt, the Levites kind of stayed among themselves, and they continually studied. One of the things I read said that Levi himself lived long enough to see the birth of Moses, although he didn't see Moses come back as deliverer. But he did live long enough to see his birth. Did you realize they lived that long? Levi. He lived longer than any of the brothers. He had the longest life. Remember, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are all of the tribe of Levi. The 2 brothers and a sister there from the tribe of Levi. God chose the tribe of Levi to bring about deliverance. I find that really interesting. The one who would take vengeance for himself becomes one who takes vengeance for God. When it's channeled under God's direction. In Exodus 32, we have the sin of the golden calf. Remember that story? We just read it a few weeks ago here. And the whole concept that so quickly they would turn aside, so quickly they would want to have something solid, something tangible to look at. When Moses came down from the mountain with the vengeance of God, he gave a command for God's vengeance among the people. Exodus 32:27, he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man take a strap to his side. Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp, killing from one end to the other, killing the brother and friend and neighbor. Those who bowed to that idol were to be killed." And it says, the Levites did as Moses commanded. It doesn't say any other tribes joined. It says the Levites did as Moses commanded. And that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." Because they did the vengeance of God instead of their own revenge. God honored that. When Moses gives his blessings, in Deuteronomy 33, he gives a very interesting blessing to Levi. About Levi, he said, "Your Thummim and Urim belong to the man you favored. You tested him at Massah, you contended with him at the waters of Meribah. And he said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. He did not recognize his brothers or acknowledge his own children, but he watched over your word and guarded your covenant. He teaches your precepts to Jacob and your law to Israel. He offers incense before you and whole burnt offerings on your altar. So bless all his skills, O Lord. Be pleased with the work of his hands. Smite the loins of those who rise up against him and strike his foes until they rise no more." You see, in the blessing of Levi, he's speaking to God. And he says to God, your Thummim and Urim belong to the one you favored. The one you favored being Levi. You tested him at Massah, contended with him at the waters of Meribah. According to rabbinic tradition, at Massah, when everyone else was complaining about the bitter water, Levi kept his mouth shut. I don't know that that's true. That's a midrash. But it says here, you tested him at Massah. So somehow God saw the Levites were true to him there. In the waters of Meribah, which is where Moses struck the rock. And he said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. When we serve the Lord, wasn't Yeshua said that he who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of the kingdom? That's kind of a hard saying, isn't it? But it comes right back to this. That serving the Lord is primary. It's focused. It's important. It says that Levi watches over the word and guards the covenant and teaches the precepts to Jacob. And that's exactly what Levi did. And as Levi was scattered, Levi became the teacher. Levi became the one representing God to the people. And then when Levi came through the Kohen into the tabernacle, into the temple, they became the ones representing the people to God. Their zeal was turned to God. The curse becomes a blessing. And as their name, even their name indicates, where it says the one who will accompany, they became the ones to accompany the sacred things of God. They encamped around the tabernacle in the midst of the people. When it was time to move, it was the Levites who picked up the tabernacle, who put away all of the furnishings, who protected, guarded, and carried the holy things of God. During all the years of wandering, it was the tribe of Levi. The tribe of Levi. When they came to the land, and land was given out, they were given cities, spread out throughout the tribes. And in doing so, they set up what were called the cities of refuge. And in doing that, again, they're guarding and protecting the holy things of God, which are the people of God. Guarding and protecting the people. They became the centers for teaching and government. While others worked the land for their provision, the Levites had to depend on their brothers to bring them provision, and had to depend on God to provide through their brothers. Their inheritance was God. They had no other inheritance. They were given the rights to tithes and offerings and portions of the sacrifices that were brought to the tabernacle. That was their provision. And not only were they commanded that they were not to go out and till the ground, but the people were commanded to care for the economic needs of the Levites. They had no other way to care for their own economic needs. They couldn't feed their children other ways. They didn't have land. They couldn't grow the crops. They had to depend on others. One of the things that happened throughout time was that this very special people, dependent on God as their provider, set apart specifically to God as their provider. When the temple was destroyed, there was no more provision for Levites, because there were no more offerings coming in. When the people were carried off into Babylon, when they were carried off into their captivities, there was no more provision. But they continued teaching. They continued teaching. When Ezra returned to build the temple, one of the first things he did was to bring back Levites to serve in the temple. He gathered the Levites, and when there weren't enough of them, he said, "We're waiting till more come." And he sent for more, until they had enough to go into the city, to go to Jerusalem with Levites and Cohen to serve God. And he established a system again to support them. One of the things that happened when Haggai came was that they had quit doing it, and the Levites were having to till the fields again. And there was no one to work in the temple. But it got reestablished, and it got set up again, and it got put together. And Ezra and Haggai and those of his generation set up a Sanhedrin and set up a system to provide, so there would always be provision in the house of God. Always provision in the house of God. For the servants in the house of God. Provision in my house. It was a great system. But it did kind of get taken advantage of over the years. By the time of Yeshua, Levites had become very wealthy. They had done so because if someone vowed something unto God, and when they'd done the vow, that property then belonged to the Levite. If someone brought a lamb for their Passover sacrifice, and they examined it, and it wasn't perfect, it wasn't without defect, they would say, "Oh, well, this one's not okay, but I have one right over here that is, I'll sell it to you. I'll take your lamb in trade, and then I'll sell you this one." And they were making money and profiting off of the people's sacrifices. Wonder why Jesus turned the tables in the temple? Who was he chasing out? Corrupt Levites, who were taking advantage of the people. They weren't just exchanging money so that they could all have the shekel to give, but they were also making sure that what they had was what got purchased, so they ended up with more money. You know, it's like when you trade your car into a car dealership. Do they ever really give you the value of that car? And they always sell you something that's worth a lot more, right? Because they're trying to make a profit. That's exactly what these guys were doing, but they were doing it with the sacrifices people were bringing to the temple. Yeshua said, "This has become a house of thieves. It's supposed to be a house of prayer." But one of the things that's really interesting is that the high priest was not a Cohen. He was an appointee by Rome. He was an appointee by Rome. And so he wasn't even an appropriate high priest. Yeshua drove the money changers from the tabernacle, from the temple. He disciplined the Levites for abusing the privilege. They had a privilege to serve and to depend on people, and they abused that privilege. And I'm going to tell you that those who serve the Lord and serve the people, who abuse the people and take advantage of it and get wealthy off the people, God will judge. He will. And I don't even have to name names. I don't want to. But he judges those who take advantage of the people. Especially widows. Especially widows and orphans. God has a special love for them. A special, special love for them. And he doesn't want Levites or anyone else taking advantage of them. You see, with the great privilege of being close to God, sometimes something else comes with it. And that's pride. And sometimes there's temptation to take advantage of things. And that's where we have to continually come back to that we're servants. We're servants. We're servants. Because we don't want the blessing to become a curse again. In the month of Adar, too, as we recognize Levi, which was a tribe that took a curse, turned it into a blessing, we still also see something else. This is the month we celebrate Purim. I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, but the story of Esther is also about a curse turned into a blessing. She was an orphan. Her parents had been killed in Jerusalem. She was taken in by a cousin, Mordecai. Then she was taken from Mordecai, probably not really wanting to be taken from him. Taken from Mordecai into the harem to be trained to be what? Well, for this big beauty pageant thing and the chance of becoming the next Vashti. And, well, what Jewish woman would really want that? Do you ever think about that? According to rabbinic tradition, she was supposed to be Mordecai's wife. She'd been brought into his home for him to protect her and care for her. And she was going to be his wife. And he loved her dearly. And there was great sacrifice when she was taken from him. We don't hear that side of the story, because we've not read that side of it. We think, oh, wonderful, I get chosen. No, it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't what she dreamed of. It wasn't what she wanted. But what happens is this girl who's stolen from her family, who's kind of made into the new queen, who really didn't have much rights, if you think about it. From that curse, she becomes a messenger of salvation for the people. She becomes that instrument by which salvation is brought. Levi, from the curse, becomes a messenger of salvation to the people. He becomes a messenger. He becomes that by which salvation is shown through all the temple sacraments and the sacrifices. And in this month, one of the things I've asked the Lord to show me is how do we take whatever curses are active in our lives and turn them into a blessing? Because that's what God wants to do. That's what God wants to do. He really does. He wants to take that which was meant for evil and make it into something good. He wants to transform our anger into zeal. Zeal for the house of the Lord. Zeal for the house of the Lord consumed Yeshua. He wants to take our rash behavior and turn it into obedience. He wants to take that which is scattered and disruptive in our lives and make it a distribution. Distribute for profit. He wants us to become servants of God. servants to God, and messengers of salvation. You know, I've, for a long time, talked about myself as being part of the tribe of Judah. Why? Because Judah is praise, and I love praise. But the reality is that's not where my heart is. Those of you who've been around long enough know that I kind of struggle to get the praise stuff out there. I really go the deep stuff, right? That's where I go. That's where I belong. I belong on my face before the Lord. That's what the Levites did. That's what the Kohen did. They sang in the temple. Judah sang out in the field. Judah led the wars. The Levites ministered to God. And that's my heart. And when I first started this, when we moved into this building, we'd already started this ministry for a while, but when we moved into this building, a friend of mine got me a gift. And I kind of laughed at it first. But this tabret. And it's got the lion on it. Yay! Judah, right? Yeshua, Adonai. The lion of the tribe of Judah will prevail. And I loved it. And then I looked at the back. And I went, oh my goodness. This isn't about Judah. This is about the priest. Because these are the 12 tribes. And as the priest bore the tribes before God, when we minister to God, we bring the people to Him. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's part of my role. To bring the tribes, the people, to where they can see God. And their faces before God. I don't use this very often. And I don't let other people use it very often. Because of its special meaning. Because of very special meaning. I'm very careful with it. Because this is the tabret of the priesthood. Now Paul says we're all part of the priesthood. You don't have to be the tribe of Levi. But it says you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. A chosen generation, a royal priesthood. You were not a people, but now you are a people. You are a people of God. So each of us can take from some of what is blessed in Levi and receive it for ourselves. Because we're all priests before God. And that's what I want for this month. I want us to take those blessings of God and have them incorporated into our lives. O God, Lord our God and God of our fathers, make this coming month one of good and blessing. Grant us long life, a life of peace, of good, of blessing, of sustenance, of vigor, a life marked by a reverence for you and a dread of sin, a life free from shame and reproach, a life of prosperity and honor, a life in which the love of the Word and the fear of God animate us, a life in which our heartfelt desires are fulfilled for good. May He who performed miracles for our fathers and liberated them from slavery to freedom, may He quickly liberate us and gather the exiles from the four corners of the earth, even all of Israel. And let us all say, Amen. The new moon, the month of Adar 2, will begin tomorrow night. May it prove to be good for all of Israel. May the Holy One, blessed be He, granted to us and to all His people, the house of Israel, for life and peace, for gladness and joy, for deliverance and consolation. And let us say amen. And we're going to do blessed are you, because that is the next prayer. And I kind of like singing my prayers. We did it this morning. There it is. Yeah. Blessed are you. And there's a dance to this one too. And somebody learned it.
Oh
verse 10:10 says, "At your times of rejoicing, your appointed feasts and new month festivals, you are to sound the shofar over your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and they will be for a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God." We've had a fellowship offering. That's what that meal was, by the way. Did you know that? Our meal is a fellowship offering. And so it's time to get the shofars out. And we have shofars, if someone needs one. And a small one here? Anyone else want one? Anyone else want this one? I'll give them this one. It's easier to blow. This one's easier to blow. You know, it's kind of like whistling. You know that old movie line that says, "Just pucker up your lips and blow"? It's kind of like that. You wet your lips. It helps me. I wet my lips and then I seal it. The lips seal it. See? You did it! Good! Good! See? Yeah. And the blessing for this is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu leshmoa kol shofar. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commands and instructs us to hear the sound of the shofar. You ready? Let's go around the room, one at a time. Not bad. Hey, it's new. It's okay. Go ahead. I like that. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us alive and sustained us and has enabled us to enjoy this season. Happy month of Adar too. And I'm hoping to see all of you for Purim. It's going to be fun. We have flyers out there. Hamadasim, yes!